Welcome back to another one of our industry sessions for the Digital Media Festival. Today I am joined with Dr. Jay Hodgson, who is a faculty member here at Western University. I've known Jay for almost 15 years now. When I first started working at Western, and we've gone on and we've done numerous things together. So thanks for being here with us today.
And taking
a moment out of your busy schedule.
Happy to be here.
To chat to our students and our budding filmmakers. So Jay is a guru of music. Hard to kind of put into words what this man has done over the years.
A polymath.
So we will link things in the video and in the YouTube description where you can go and check out some of Jay's work and publications. Yeah, I think kind of for our students, the big thing today is kind of teaching them about music, how music's integrated into film, the scoring process, mastering, and kind of just your philosophy on music overall.
Sure.
So kind of the first question I would have for you is, how did you become a musician? The $100.
Yeah. How was I so cursed? I was always interested in music, and I was intuitively pretty good at it. And I was the youngest in a really large family of very talented kids. All of my siblings skipped 2 grades at least. My sister went to university when she was like 16, and I struggled to pass. And the only thing I could do was music. Maybe that's not true. The only thing I was interested in was music. But I just, from the time I was like 3 or 4 years old, it was all I was really interested in. And I was fascinated by it. And then basically, like I would take apart the stereo system. I have a memory of taking apart the stereo system and putting it back together on the deck, and then putting on the Rolling Stones' greatest hits, blaring it super loud, and then going and playing in the sandbox. Like that's how I know how young I was, and it was just striking. And so I was allowed to choose an instrument, whereas everybody else in the family had to learn piano and do conservatory stuff. And I had to do conservatory stuff. And then, I was good at it. I was able to, I was entertaining at bars when I was like 14. I remember singing up north at a bar when I was
what instrument?
Guitar and singing.
Guitar
and
singing.
I would sing old 60s songs. And then opportunity knocked, right? I got a tour with John McDermott, which was really lucky, and he would take me to play with that group. Bill Bridges was a great guitar player, and he was really nice, and I saw from him what a professional touring life was like. And then got scholarship to Berkeley, started a band, and then toured and played around and did fine, and put together, was really lucky to have a great band around me where every member, I always say, we were at a point where we were really going to make it. And every member has a Grammy, every member has a #1. I don't, I have a mortgage and children. But I met my wife at a show and realized I didn't want to tour anymore, and it felt very repetitive, and I was more interested in the studio, and I was just interested in music.
So you mentioned Berkeley music for our students out there who might not know what that is. Describe kind of like your experience there and what that is.
Absolutely. So Berkeley College of Music is in Boston, and basically when you're really, really into music, normally you're like the guy or the girl or the person at your high school. Berkeley attracts that person from all over the world. So like I remember hanging out with, I'll never forget it, Seiro Hiroshi. Hardly spoke a word of English, chain smoked in the corner, and was one of the best guitarists I ever saw. And we would just sit down and play guitar together, you know. So it's really a trade school for musicians. You learn from working musicians, you learn how to work, and it's fully practical. before this place existed, before Western existed, it was probably one of the only worldwide hubs where all the freaky musician people from their towns came and got together for 3-4 years, and it was brutal. Like, I forget what the number is, but like 1,000 wash out in the second year. Don't make it.
Very
yeah.
competitive and very.
I would practice for 7 hours, 8 hours, just trying to get this motion. And at some point I realized that's not productive, and that's not actually
what you wanted to do.
Yeah, and that's not really it's finger gymnastics.
For
and
sure, it's muscle
there's
memory.
there's a type of musicianship where that's cool, and I realized also, like, I don't listen to that. I don't, whether that's because it's like I'll never be able to make it, and therefore if I enjoyed it I might try it, and that's too much. But I'm not interested in it. And I know a lot of musicians who are, and who are amazing at it.
So kind of after Berkeley, you then came back here.
Yeah.
And then you started your graduate studies. What was your focus when you were doing your PhD?
Yeah, so I, that's right, I spent a year in Boston playing, and over the course of that year, I just decided I don't want this life. Like I said, I miss being curious, so I got into an MA in Hamilton at McMaster, which was a music criticism MA. I didn't want to be a critic. The first 2 years were really just getting used to this, what study of popular music is in the institution, and I was profoundly dissatisfied. But so in other words, I got really interested in what was stopping people from actually studying this. And at some point I realized no one's doing it.
Right.
That's what it is. This is all just an endless diversion so that people don't have to say, I don't know what it means when you slam a compressor. I don't know what that sounds like. And so it became my goal ever since then. And my dissertation was just all slowly getting to a point where you could recognize that recording practice, making records, working in sound, scoring things, that this was its own art that only related to music as we understand it via notation and education by way of analogy. And that in order to understand this, I have to figure out how in a research institution to get students and people learning to actively make music as part of their learning. But that's what the dissertation was. I mean, if you want to know really like a fun way of thinking about it, it's that when you listen to a record, you don't hear sound per se, you hear sound that represents sound. In other words, you don't hear a snare drum or a vocal, you don't hear acoustic phenomena or sounds. You hear a single sound produced by diaphragm and tweeter and port technology or headphone technology, which is actually created to trick your neuropsychophysiology into believing it detects the presence of that. Just like when we look at this, we're seeing alternating and oscillating lights and lumens that are designed and orchestrated in such a way to create these patterns, what we see as patterns. Right.
So that was a little snippet of representing sound by Jay, and I did some of the images, and it's still it's in its second edition right now.
It's in its second edition from Bloomsbury.
Bloomsbury, which is the publishing house which I think did Harry Potter.
They did Harry Potter. So me and J.K. Rowling were kind of
pretty much the same.
You too, right? We're all
buddies.
I send her a Christmas card every year.
She never writes back.
Never writes
back.
A little snobby.
Right?
Yeah.
So kind of with that, you've done a lot in academia, but you're a man of many hats, and while you've been teaching and researching, you've also actually pulled off a lot of publications that I've always found interesting over the years. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. Well, one of the neat things about this position is that, I teach songwriting and record production, so in a lot of ways, I suppose I'm a professor in the same way that somebody who writes novels and teaches creative writing is, right? At some point, I got really interested in audio mastering, And so I actually wound up clearing like thousands of underground techno tracks.
What's audio mastering? Just
Audio
first?
mastering.
Yeah.
So when you make a record, you go through a number of stages. Pre-production, which is when you're conceiving everything and figuring out how we're going to make the record. Then there's tracking, when you're making the record. You're playing the guitar parts, you're singing the parts, you're doing the drums, redoing the guitar parts, redoing the vocal part. Then there's mixing, and this is, by the way, very artificial now, but because a lot of electronic genres, you're kind of doing everything at once. But you're mixing, which is blending everything together, and then audio mastering comes along and takes a mix and thinks about it in terms of distribution and says, well, how will this sound if it's played back in a mall? How will this sound if it's played back really loudly in a car? How will this? And so you sort of do, in North America, it's the final stage of mixing, really. It's the final part of the creative process. And your job is to know, your job is to be sort of like the Jedi Council person who's like, no, that's too much bass. We need to tamp this down. Yes, that's that. Or, we can make this really aggressive if we move this down and move that up and make it this loud. So that's
what mastering.
That's what mastering is. And for whatever reason, I had a real knack with it in like electronic bass heavy genres, which probably has to do with the fact that I always loved hip hop. Growing up, I was always into hip hop, always into techno, electronic dance music, all that stuff. Even though as a musician, I made like grungy rock, right? Like that's what I did, and folk rock even. But and so I came up with a really unique line, and I know it's unique because if I were to describe it to you, any audio engineer in the audience would be like, that's wrong. And for the audio engineers, what I'll say is the first stage of my mastering line were actually mic pre's. Which you're not supposed to do. In fact, those two mic pre's. So yeah, and so I just kept working, and like I said, my discipline is just process. And so I cleared thousands and thousands of tracks, and a few of them were nominated for Junos, and I used that right there for those, which is normally what you use to like track a guitar. Right. So it was wrong, but I liked it. And that's what I mean about academia too. Sort of like I was able to do that. If I was working in a place where I had to clear 5 records a day in order to pay off the whatever, even just the rent in the place, I wouldn't be able to do that. I wouldn't be free to study it. I also got to work on a few film soundtracks, right? My favorite one, I think, still on hindsight, would be the Charles Bradley movie. Partially because Charles Bradley's super cool, Daptone's cool. It was such an inspiring story. Partially because I didn't go to school with Powell, who was involved in making that film, but he lived with us in Medfed for a year before I came back home. And also partially because that was actually one of the most challenging scores I've ever done, where not everything was accepted. You had to find a way to fit into like the Daptone soul vibe and that sort of thing. And of course, you also have to do it in such a way that like the main meat of it is Charles Bradley's music, right?
Of course,
so so that was cool.
Yeah. You had because I remember this and you probably forgot, the UN film.
Oh right, Voices from Emergency. Lisa Russell did it, and that's right. It screened in the United Nations General Assembly. That's right.
Fantastic.
I always forget about that.
Actually,
yeah,
that's one of the first.
That's right,
yeah.
And I loved it too. That's right, and that actually came through Mike Price down in Brooklyn initially, and then I've been able to do my own stuff, which is fun.
I remember. Sorry to interject.
Yeah.
Didn't you master for Jay-Z on a track?
Worked with it was with Joe DePace. Yeah.
Of Loud Luxury.
Loud Luxury, that's right. And Joe and Derek had got a project in from a rapper in Edmonton who was on, is it Rockanation? Jay-Z's. Rockefeller, yeah. Jay-Z's label / thing. And they were doing a collab on Encore from the Black Album.
Right.
That's right. And I had the honor of actually mixing and mastering it, which was really cool. Yeah, and that was also, Joe, that's right, I forgot about that.
What was your involvement with the Junos when they came to London a couple years ago?
Yeah, so I was, so the man who really did it is Chris Campbell. His name should be legendary in London for that show. There were other people as well, but I wasn't privy to all of it, so I only got to see Chris run around and just do like all this really cool, awesome work. And I was lucky enough that he consulted me about the industry panel, specifically with regards to the at the time the emerging, what looked like a kind of confluence or however you like merging of video game industry, like the gaming industry and the pop music industry. And I've always said that that's actually the future, that that streaming is fine, but really like if you look at the money, the vast majority of money is made through scoring, and so people will often look at, well, with the death of the recording industry, you have to reskill. It's actually no, you have to reorient the skills you have. Right. And so I was lucky enough to be able to work with Chris to put together this sort of I think we called it a collision, gaming and music collision. Yeah, and I emceed it, and it, you know, it was really a way of talking to the industry about itself, and again, it's that parking ego thing. It's like, look, right, you know, this looks like it's got nothing to do with you, and it kind of doesn't. Mm-hmm. You like, gone are the days when you're going to get a Learjet because you're really talented musically. Mm-hmm. It doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. Did it ever? I don't know. Yeah, I tend to think Led Zeppelin was extremely talented. People will say, well, there were other bands that were just as good, if not better. First of all, no. Sorry. Right. Yeah, but second of all, they were very good all the same, you know. And I think that actually there's a more fulfilling life in scoring for screen media in general. Right. People would go up and you'd look at their streams numbers, and then you just plug in like Marshmello Fortnite concert, and it's like 3 million at that moment, and the next day the playlist goes up, like the playlist goes up, huge. Billboard,
and
the
that's
Billboard
the thing,
charts.
like the video game industry is gigantic, and in terms of Hollywood, it dwarfs it by like 10 times. I think,
absolutely.
Right? And you think Hollywood is just huge juggernaut of like content, but like the video game industry is just
it's the rear view mirror, man. I love that's a nice, great McLuhan quote. We behold new media according to old media, which is a bit of a truism. It's just basically saying like we understand things according to how we can understand them.
Yeah.
But it's this next generation that comes along and looks at it and says, well, why are you doing that? That's so dumb. Why am I going to do that? And so, I mean, in a lot of ways, we grew up with Hollywood and the classic record label. Yep. And so I see this as a teacher a lot. Like, I have to constantly remind myself when I have students in the class, they're not interested in filling the arena. I mean, I'm sure they'd love to, but if you ask them, what do you want to do? 15 years ago, it was, I want to be a rock star. I want to be on a label. Now you have the odd person who's like that, but most people are like, oh, I want to provide music for this. I want to make music. They want to be creative, and there's work for them, you know. Right. And not only that, they can make a living doing it, doing their really esoteric. Like, you can make a living playing just didgeridoo for techno games, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
It never would have been possible
Not before. No, exactly.
Or you would have had to light a brush fire to your life and go on tour with whatever band was hitting it that wanted a didgeridoo. And,
right. Yeah, exactly. Well, okay, so with that, what would be advice to kind of a musician who's starting out, who wants to get in the industry? What advice would you give them?
Yeah. So one, I would say, rather than consider your greatest skill to be your sort of like, it's not, like all things in life, it's not merit based. It's relationship based. It's relational. So I feel like I got a lot of work in the 90s in Boston, for instance, less because I was a good guitarist. I could play to the click track, which like is an asset. So the last thing I'll say, if you're breaking in, develop your process. Never, inspiration just means I feel like it, you know. So develop your process and engage process. So.
And what do you mean by process?
What I mean is that most songwriters, for instance, when they enter this program, they've had some intuitive success. They listen a lot and they've put stuff together, and they may even know how to write songs. But that doesn't mean they have a songwriting process which they can rely on to write songs. So eventually this is going to become a profession. You're actually going to lose interest in inspiration. It's like at some point that's really not interesting.
No.
And you become interested in song, let's say, and in recording, and the process itself becomes what really sustains you, because you no longer are so you've made your nut. Yeah. You're established in whatever way you're established, so you're not interested in making your mark and getting noticed. You're interested in actually just like creating music.
Yeah.
And that's where things get really interesting, I think.
Yeah.
When you get beyond inspiration, beyond good or bad, and you think more in terms of like efficacy.
Yeah.
Just does it do what I hope it would do?
What it will do.
Yep.
I think that's solid advice for any aspiring musicians out there, or anyone looking to get into production as well. We'll have a quick look at Jay kind of working and what the program looks like that he works on when it comes to mastering. And,
sure.
Yeah, so we'll do that right now.
All right, so I have a track in from actually an old student, and it was a track that he had written, and we worked on the production for from January to I think early April, maybe late March of 2021, and then he's gone and recorded parts of it again with some really hip sort of Toronto musicians, which is cool. And the track is in, and I'm just mastering it now at this point. So we're at the point where we're just doing little final touches to the overall track. And so what I did is, for the master, I'm actually going to give him a couple of different options, because I hear this master going two ways. And normally I would just impose and say, I want this one. But the artist is actually, I like the artist, and I'm happy to do the extra work that it entails. So what I've done is taken the track, and first of all, I have to make sure that it reaches a particular point on a loudness meter, so that it will sound optimally loud on the various playback media that it might find itself in. Like, for instance, on Spotify, you use something called loudness units full scale, and Spotify supposedly is normalized, or everything's evened out to roughly minus 12 LUFS. And I found that you have to make things a little bit louder actually still. Whereas on a compact disc, for instance, you can go a little bit louder than that. But at the same time, as you make it louder, the balance changes slightly, and you have to change the balance. And I also wanted to bring out the vocals a little bit, and so I've bussed off, if anyone knows what this is, I've bussed off a bandpass version of the track, and I brought that really low, and then I ran a sample delay on it to throw the phase out a little bit, because I wanted to create a little bit of interference in the mid-range. To create a little bit of additive phase, which is to say to increase the volume a little bit while smoothing it out in this area. And so I'll play you that right now. That's this right here, which if I bring in the rest of the track, you'll hear it's just a little thin bit that I wanted to increase. So here's everything. And this is just the little part that I wanted to take these frequencies and move them a little to the side. So. And then I wanted to actually get a bit of tape on this. So I came up in the 90s, and we actually used tape machines, and we used this here, the ATR 102. And so I'm running it through to get a bit of a cohesion and balance, to get the sort of tape, the kind of compression that comes with tape, and the little bit of low frequency bias. And I'm going to actually include a version without it as well, because I can hear this as a more digital sounding track as well. But so if you can hear the difference, here would be, I'm going to give two versions with tape. One is getting the signal from the reproduction head, and one is just running it through the tape machine. So this is the repro head. And this would be through. Now I like through the most out of all of this because it's actually the smoothest. It has the most tape sound, whereas at the repro head you don't get, it doesn't quite tamp down as much on it. But I would render both. Then I throw on a limiter, which allows you to push the input volume but cap the output. And this limiter I really like. It's the Oxford limiter, Sony Oxford limiter. I set as long an attack time as possible because I actually don't want this thing to tamp down on anything except for the very like fleeting loud peaks. And I threw a little bit of an enhancement curve on it, which is a dynamic process where the highs and the lows go up, raise in volume a little bit depending on how much energy is there. So as there's more energy, it comes up even more, which takes the balance and shapes it a little bit further. So if I were to play it without any of this processing, it would sound like this. I'm just going to take the loud part. Sounds pretty good because Connor's got really good. But here's with everything. It's just a little more vibrant. Again, that's without. And that's with. And then to render it, using Logic, which is what I'm using. Again, I do things a little differently. I have a few colleagues in mastering who would scoff at that, to the detriment of their bank account, because it really is just ones and zeros. So in any event, I would bounce one version, call it tape, and then date it so that Connor knows what the difference is, and then it renders. And that's it. Cool.
I think for the next portion, let's field some questions from some of our students.
Sure.
And I have a few here from Mr. McCurdy's grade 8 class at Sir Isaac Brock. And
Cool.
The first one comes from Ava. And she
Ava,
wants
I got her name tattooed
right
on
there,
my finger.
Right there? His wife,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So Ava wants to know, how do you get a song on Spotify?
Excellent. So this is a great question. To get your song on Spotify, there's sort of two ways of answering that. One, you can use an online aggregator like DistroKid, TuneCore, CD Baby. I use DistroKid because I put out a lot of stuff and sometimes just for fun too. And that allows me to pay a subscription per year. It's something like $20 per year. And then I can release whatever I want, and it goes to all the major streaming services. And then if I decide, oh, I don't want that, I can take it down too.
Fantastic.
That's unique to DistroKid in how quick and responsive it is to that.
Right.
Of course, that's a subscription model. If you don't pay the subscription, your stuff's no longer there.
Right.
CD Baby, TuneCore, you pay a one-time fee, and they'll distribute it forever.
Right.
That said, it's a staggering number. Something like 63% of all songs uploaded to Spotify receive less than 1,000 spins, and I think it could even be less than 50 spins.
Wow.
So getting it there is as simple as following what they tell you need to do on those sites. Getting it heard is a question of developing markets, or less cynically, becoming vocal in whatever communities you belong to. So if you're into instrumental hip hop and you're online and you're genuinely writing when someone releases something saying, hey man, I really liked that. That was really cool. Thank you. I'm listening to this as I do this or whatever. That person may be disposed to, when you put something out, say, hey, I went and checked it out. And I shared it with my fan, you know, and listeners. Not really fans anymore, right? It's just like people who listen to this stuff. So that I would say is the other side of that question. It's real easy to get up on Spotify. It's really hard for people to know and take advantage of the fact that it's up on Spotify.
Right, I see. Okay, so no, that's solid advice for Ava for sure. Isabel has a question, and I think you kind of somewhat already answered this, but maybe you can just kind of touch on it again.
Sure.
How would you get started in the music industry?
Right. So the first thing I would do is commit. Because actually, like I said before, it's about relationships and networks of people and being out there and within those networks. Because an old student of mine always says, a rising tide floats all boats. Right. And that's just true in general. You're not going to make it because you write this great song or you're the best player ever. That's not how it happens, ever. Even in those cases, you know, somebody discovered Elvis and put him out there. You know, someone packaged Elvis, right? So, so I would say if you really, really want to make it in music, you have to commit to music. That said, be open and smart about what that means, because it's probably not what you think it means. Becoming, you know, like Taylor Swift is probably not making it in music. You know, Taylor Swift comes from money, had a whole record label bought for her advancement. Like, there's nothing wrong with that, but you have to understand this was a process put into motion many years before it reached fruition. And I think she's incredibly talented. I really do. In fact, in my mixing class, we do Shake It Off. We have the session files and we use that to, but you're more likely to figure out how to make your living in music by beginning the process. And so that just simply means being authentic. Don't pretend to be anything you're not. You know, reach out to people who are in a similar position, making it at this point, and say, hey, I'm in a similar position. I like what you do. I want to be involved.
Right.
It's not cynical. I'm not exploiting you. You're not exploiting me. We're both sort of trying to get ahead.
Yeah.
I guarantee you later on in life, one or two of them are going to provide some kind of value in return, you know?
Yeah.
So again, if you want to make it in music, really embrace the relational part of it and begin the process. Simply by saying, even if that means, what's her name, Isabel?
Yeah.
Yeah, even if that means every night you say, like, I, Isabel, am going to try to be a musician, or I, Isabel, am going to try to make it in music. I mean, just saying that to yourself at night, committing to it. Yeah, it like, yeah, and it like, it makes it a little real.
It makes it more.
Yeah.
Our next question comes from Shelby, and you might have touched on this already. Why did you want to become a musician?
So that's a fascinating question for me, because I don't know, and I think about that a fair bit. It was just always clear that I was going to be a musician, and it was clear to other people too. And I wonder about that. Most of the friends I made at Berkeley, for instance, which is when you really take your risk and say, I'm going to be music, it was the same thing. They were just like, I've just always known, you know, you want to be a musician when you just like, yeah, I want to be a musician.
Yeah.
That seems cool. Doesn't have to be everything you do. Yeah. But it's just like, at some point you're like, I want to do this. I want to continue to do this. This makes me happy. Yeah.
Okay, final question comes from, second last question from Olivia. What's your favorite thing about the music industry?
That's good. That's a very good question.
Yeah.
For me, music is like a lineage. There's like a type of humanity that does it after a certain age. Early on, it's all caught up in social mating rituals. I mean, it really is, right? It's like it's really caught up in that. Coolness, status, all that stuff then gets superimposed. But then after a particular age, It's only those of us who couldn't exist without it
Yeah.
who continue to do it.
Yeah.
Because that's actually, like, it's just self-evident, right?
Right,
Like,
yeah.
if you could do something else, you would do something else.
Yeah.
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 No, I think that's- I think
and
that's
so
a-
my favorite thing is that you're actually a part of this group of human beings who never quite fit in, don't have the same, I don't mean corporate in like the cheesy, oh man, that's so corporate, but don't have the same sort of sense of corporate belonging, because in large part you're rejected by the broader social, like you truly don't fit in because you don't fit in. You do different things.
Yeah.
It may be professional, but it's very different. And so my favorite thing is actually to continue that, to continue to make it viable for future generations that are going to do it. And I know that sounds like really strange, because at root, you make music because you're a hedonist, because you like music. But that's what I enjoy about it now, because I think that's partially just from teaching. I'm constantly interacting with people on the cusp of their career, and I feel a little bit like a Zen Roshi or something, trying to help them find their way, because
Jedi Master.
Yes, right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Only. I would say that I have the privilege of working with a lot of students who actually should be. It's outrageous. It's outrageous that they're not recognized as a Jedi Master,
right? Yeah,
because they're really good.
They're really good. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. And then finally, just the last question. This is from Shant, and he's in Mrs. Gonzalez's grade 8 class, and he wants to know, he's a guitar player.
Yeah.
He's kind of just starting out. He wants to know, what songs would you recommend for him to play?
To learn?
Yeah.
Excellent. If you're really just starting, Wild Thing was the first song I ever played by Jimi Hendrix.
Right.
Then Knocking on Heaven's Door is a good one. And then you can start to look into Wish You Were Here. There's some single line stuff happening, but it's not too tricky. Those are 3 songs that you can play and sing along with. There's also the Peter Gunn, dun 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 dun.
Right,
dun.
James Bond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Misery Lou, the surf guitar stuff. Once you get a little more active. And then I'd also recommend always having a finger picking song.
Okay.
Once you're able to finger pick,
to
learn a few different patterns and try to take songs that you know from strumming and finger pick them and play them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Yeah, that's really great advice. So that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that with us. I'm pretty sure the students may have never seen anything like that before. So
for sure.
Definitely insightful. I just want to thank you for taking the time today, for sitting down.
Happy to do it.
Chat and
thanks for coming in.
Being one of our industry session
participants.
And we hope to have you again for another session sometime soon. So thanks
for
again.
sure.
Appreciate it.
For sure, man.
All right. Yep. We'll talk to you guys soon, and stay tuned for another episode.